It started out well enough for Donald Trump. On the economy, Kamala Harris sounded nervous, and he was at least vaguely landing the messages his campaign wanted. But the tables started to be turned on abortion, and then, honestly, his night pretty much fell apart. She laid trap after trap for him, and he launched himself headlong into every single one of them, talking about crowd sizes and immigrants eating cats and dogs, and even his inheritance from his dad. But was it enough to convince the many undecided voters? Welcome to Talking Politics USA. It was the political showdown we have all been waiting for. Donald Trump going head-to-head with Kamala Harris in front of the TV cameras for the first time. So did the debate deliver the fireworks we were expecting? It has been a day, and it will be a week, of a lot of discussion about it. Because let's face it, the polls couldn't be any tighter. Frankly, the two are neck and neck. And as the dust settles, I'm joined to talk about it by Adam Hodge, who served in both the administrations of President Biden and President Obama, and of course by the former Trump administration advisor, Heather Nauert. And as you can see, our US correspondent, Dan, is with us as always. The very beginning of the debate seems a good place to start, though, and it was all about the economy.
Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run.
Then there was the often divisive topic of abortion, which saw some fact-checking from the moderators.
They have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
And all of that before things got really a bit more heated between the two candidates.
People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans.
Well, there we have it, a taste of what was a pretty fascinating debate. Let's put that to our team. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Heather, let's come to you first. I felt like watching it here, and I think a lot of people did. She turned up very well prepared, and he didn't turn up very well prepared. She turned up as a prosecutor who'd read her brief very carefully, knew her messages, and laid trap after trap for him, which he fell right into every single time. Would you agree with that, or do you think that's completely incorrect?
Well, I can certainly say that I think it wasn't President Trump's best night. That being said, ABC News slanted its coverage in favor of Harris by repeatedly fact-checking him, not fact-checking her when there were opportunities, and it would have been right to do so. So they failed to do that. But overall, not his best night. But still, in the end, Harris failed to prove that she was different from the Biden administration. And the vast majority of American voters said that they want change in this election and that Harris doesn't represent the change that they want. Those who want change feel that Trump is better prepared to do that than Harris. So is this going to change how things look for the entire election? I don't think so. I think this election is still going to be down to the very wire.
Adam, when you look at the detail of a lot of the polls we've had recently, and we've debated before and no doubt will before the election how much we can trust the polls, but there are some consistencies. We've discussed some of them before, the number of undecided voters, the number of people who say they don't know enough about Harris yet. But one key factor is that she's behind on the economy. People are a bit hacked off with the Biden White House on the economy. They put some of that down to her and they put Trump ahead. That is one key area I'm sure you would agree she needed to close tonight. And honestly, whatever else you may say about the debate, can you honestly say she will have closed that gap?
Well, I think one of her first tests last night was actually just to show that she looked the part, that she could be plausible as the commander-in-chief and president. And from the moment she walked on the debate stage, she took control of the debate by going over and shaking his hand and introducing herself. And then I think in her first answer, which was a little bit nervous to be expected with the first presidential debate, she actually did speak about her ideas and her plans. She talked about how she wants to cut taxes for the middle class, how she wants to help small businesses grow. She rooted it in her own personal story, which I thought was actually a pretty effective way to kick off the debate. The problem for Trump, honestly, is that like he walked, as you said, into every single trap. And even when he had opportunities to hammer her on her record, he just totally missed the pitch and or went off on some tangent, as you said, talked about eating cats and dogs, that I just think left the American people with a reminder that the chaos and division that you saw from his administration is still present. And she has more to do to outline her new way forward, but she certainly made some good strides last night.
Dan, Hillary Clinton won every single debate according to the polls in 2016, mostly by quite wide margins. She lost the election. What did you make of last night, and does it change anything?
I mean, look, I think most dispassionate observers would say Donald Trump lost that debate. But does it change where we are in the race? I'm not convinced it does. And I think the point you made about her needing to close the gap on the economy is critical, really. That is the number one concern for most Americans, and it is the number one concern for most undecided voters in the swing states. Did she present a compelling argument of how they will be better off under her than they have been under Joe Biden? You know, what was the policy that was going to change that? There were talks, you know, she talked about tax rebates for starting businesses and so on. I'm not really sure she kind of landed that point. And frankly, I wonder how many people will have watched till the end of the debate as well. I think people have made up their mind pretty early on. And I think, as Adam conceded, that first answer wasn't great from her. She got stronger as the debate went on. How many people stayed on to watch that debate? We haven't yet had the viewing figures for it. It will be a large number of people that tuned in, you know, north of 50 million tuned into the last one. I should think this will be considerably more. But I think the initial polling that we've seen so far suggests most people agree that were asked, undecided voters or registered voters anyway, that she won the debate. But did she close the argument on the economy? I think that's more of a moot point.
Heather, I'm sure you would say they're well known as not being Trump fans, but I've seen some pretty, helpful to Harris and disparaging to Trump variously comments today from the Mitt Romneys and the Christies of this world, who really didn't have a good word to say about Donald Trump's performance last night. But, as a Republican, when you watch it, like Harris turned up, she's a prosecutor, she's got to know her, her opposite number, and she's decided to press his buttons, and he just can't stop himself. He can't, his advisors must have said to him, I mean, they're smart people. We've talked about that before. They must have prepped him. They must have told him, she's going to press your button. Don't react. And he reacts every time. I mean, doesn't that bother you? That man could be the leader of the free world again very soon.
Well, look, I think it comes down to whose policies are best for the United States and whose policies bring us a safer world.
But does it, though? Doesn't some of it come down to temperament?
Well, the answer there is President Trump. We had a safer world and we were all richer as a result when he was in office. Safer and had more money in our pockets, including for all Americans, including middle-class Americans as well. So I think Republicans will come back to that fact. But to get to your point about what do his advisors say to him, yes, I've briefed the president before. Of course, his advisors can only give him their best advice. It's his choice whether or not he wants to take it. I hope he will take the advice of his advisors. Sometimes he does, sometimes he does not. There's often something that's said about President Trump is let him be him. And warts and all, he put it out there last night.
But just to press you on this, why can't he control himself? Can't be that hard. Most sentient adults manage it.
Look, I think we see President Trump show up in different ways at different times. Perhaps something was said last night that particularly irked him. I don't know exactly because I was not speaking with him last night just prior to the debate. So I'm not aware of that. But I know that certain things can bother him at other times and other times not. Look, I think he got off to a good start. I think he cares deeply about the American public. Kamala Harris took her brief seriously. She took the words of her advisors seriously. I think President Trump would be well served to listen more closely to advisors and to go through a more formal briefing prep. I know his sessions are very different, where they talk about issues and they just kind of bat around ideas. And sometimes that works, but sometimes it does not. The best way to prepare for a briefing or for a press conference or for a debate is by doing mock debates. It doesn't always seem fun, but it's the best way to do it, and it's a proven strategy. So I hope he'll go back to that. I hope there will be another debate. I don't know that Harris necessarily needs to do another debate, but for the American people's sake and for the sake of the world, it is the right thing to do so we can have a better understanding of exactly where the candidates stand. And we still do not have a good understanding of where Harris stands on many of the issues. There have been significant flip-flops, and she was never called out on them. She started to address the issue of fracking, which she has vehemently said she was against fracking. And then she went on to say, oh, but her values haven't changed at all. That tells me that she's still against fracking. That one they touched on a little bit, but there were so many other important matters, whether it's gun control, education, other items that were not followed up on. The American people deserve to know exactly where she stands, and she claims she's going to be different from President Biden. Well, in fact, she took a bunch of stuff from his website and put it on as her policy position. She's identical to President Biden, and Americans want a change this election season. And that's exactly why I think this is going to be so tight right down to the wire.
Adam, we don't have to talk about the ins and outs of the debate from Harris's point of view, because almost everyone agrees she had a very good night. She turned up very well prepped. She demonstrated that she's a very skillful performer. She's a skillful prosecutor. I guess we all knew that, but it was very clearly, I thought, demonstrated tonight, and I think anyone watching will. But Heather's got a bit of a point, hasn't she? She didn't answer an awful lot of the slightly tougher questions, really, and she turned sort of not really answering and then laying a trap for Donald Trump into an art form, which he duly fell into and took it off on a remarkable degree of tangents, even on subjects like immigration, where his team must have been screaming, no, stay on message, but he wasn't. But isn't it fair to say that she still hasn't answered a lot of the key questions about her past positions, about her current positions? Would you accept there is some truth to that? And if there is, what does she do about it? If that's the gap she still has to close with the American electorate, how does she do it?
Tom, let me just go back to the fracking question. I mean, she got the question last night, and she explained that she hasn't opposed fracking. She didn't oppose fracking in the 2020 debate. She also talked about how, as she cast the deciding vote with the Inflation Reduction Act, which has expanded the number of oil and gas leases across the country, including in Pennsylvania. So she talked about her values and her positions last night. Same was true on abortion. Same was true on immigration. She talked about how she would sign the border bill that Democrats and Republicans negotiated in a bipartisan way to try to help deal with the immigration issue. And again, that's where Trump had an opportunity to go out and attack her, and he just totally took the bait when she talked about how people are walking away from his crowd sizes, from his rallies, because they're bored and they're losing patience with his rambling about electrocuting sharks and windmills causing cancer, or Hannibal Lecter, who, for whatever reason, he keeps coming back to that. I think she will continue to lay out her new way forward. She's talked about, again, at the beginning of the debate, she talked about cutting taxes for the middle class. She talked about making easier for families to afford their everyday items like car seats and strollers and food. She talked about price gouging and how we try to bring down prices for hardworking families. Again, she's put this out there, and it's not just Biden's plans bolted onto her ideas. I mean, her new policies on housing, for example, would increase millions of rental and homes for people to build and buy. That's a real policy. That's a real agenda. And it's something that speaks to the actual issues that the American people care about.
Adam, if you were advising her tonight, would you say do a second debate? I know she said she will do one or wants to do one, but we all know that you can slow walk the negotiations if you want. Does she really want to do a second debate? Does she think it's in her interest? Would you advise her whether it was in her interest? And do you think it's likely to happen regardless of what you think?
Well, they clearly want a second debate. I mean, minutes after the first debate was over, they were already calling for a second one. And just this morning, to tell you how well they thought the first debate goes and how much they wanted a second one, they put out a new ad that was just the full hour and 40 minutes of the first debate for the American people to watch again, as like, this is all you need to see about where Vice President Harris is on the issues and the contrast for the American people. So they very much want a second debate. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to change his stripes. They're going to find new traps to lay for him, and I think he'll walk right into them. My advice, we talked about it last week. Like Heather gave him some pretty smart advice about how he should carry himself on the debate stage. Maybe he should tune into this podcast and watch it and get some tips.
Well, he tunes into a lot of things. With any luck, I'll be tuning into this. Dan, if he is watching, it seems unlikely, but hell, who knows? What would you be telling him? And how do you see the next couple of months panning out? I mean, this was a huge moment. I think we can all agree it was Harris's. Pretty much everyone agrees on that. Does it change the fundamentals in your view? How does Trump make sure that he closes this out in his favor? How does Harris try to do the same?
Look, he needs to focus forward. I mean, so much of what he talks about is backwards facing, looking in the rearview mirror of his grievances. He needs to, if I were advising him, to focus and towards the future. How can he help Americans? What benefit will he be to Americans to get a second term? The other thing I think was interesting last night is he came out into the spin room after the debate. That's highly unusual. I don't think it's ever happened before. Maybe the other two can think of another example, but there was a bit of a buzz. There was suddenly a lot of Secret Service around, and suddenly there he was. And he wasn't just there for a photo op or to appear on Fox News, which he did, but he took some questions from the press, which is pretty unusual for Donald Trump. And I think that's being interpreted as an immediate sign that he knew he had work to do to try and to spin this, and he couldn't rely on surrogates to spin it for him. He needed to get out there. It kind of worked in a way because it sucked the oxygen out of the room. All of the people like Gavin Newsom who were standing around saying what a disaster it was for him were suddenly left for dust as the entire press pack surrounded Donald Trump. And that was a real encapsulation, if you like, of both the power he has over the media, we're drawn to him like moths to a flame a little bit. But also, I think, as an acknowledgement from him that wasn't a great performance, and he felt he immediately had to go out and try and argue his way back in.
Dan, I mentioned that Clinton won the debates in 2016, or was perceived to by the polling, of course went on to lose the election. Now, you could say, well, look, Trump was an unknown quantity then, and Americans, we're tired of the Clintons, maybe wanted to make a gamble. A lot of people would say Hillary Clinton wasn't a very good candidate in a lot of ways, too much baggage from the past. People wanted to take a gamble with Trump. And now you might argue that, Trump has a lot of baggage and people may possibly not want to go back to that. We'll see whether they do or they don't. What do you think it did or didn't change fundamentally last night through that prism, given that people know Trump, they already have an opinion of him? What did it or did it not change? And we should probably talk about Taylor Swift as well, and whether that is in any way significant, really.
Well, I think the difference between 2016 and now is that they're both, the candidates are kind of proximate incumbents, if you like. They both have got a sense of having been in office, a record that people can look back on. And so he hasn't got that in kind of insurgent reputation that he had in 2016 with people going, well, he's a business guy, he must know what he's doing, he's a multi-billionaire, let's give him a go. I think people are assessing it in a much more cold, rational way in light of January the 6th and all the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, Taylor Swift is another interesting thing that dropped right at the end of the debate. She endorsed Kamala Harris. We've been waiting for that moment pretty much all summer, and the timing was exquisite. She has 283 million followers on Instagram. Now, I suspect that many of those followers on Instagram have a pretty strong opinion of Donald Trump, and it's not very favourable. But the point is that this may encourage them to get out and vote. And, you know, this is going to be so tight, this race. If even just a small fraction of Swifties in swing states decide, you know, actually, yeah, given what she says, I am going to go out and vote for Kamala Harris, that might help. But at the moment, you know, it is, once again, you know, we're back to a complete coin toss on the polling. And I haven't seen anything that suggests that this has dramatically yet shifted the dial. If anything, it appears Kamala Harris still has work to do to try and pull ahead.
Okay, we're going to talk about the next few months in just a second, but before we do, we're going to set the debate aside and return to the campaign trail itself, because it is always about the swing states in US elections, or it has been in recent elections, including Georgia, where Dan has just spent a few days. Dan, can we talk about Georgia, key swing state? The latest poll that I saw there had Harris behind there, where one in North Carolina had her ahead, which is a bit counterintuitive. I think most people would think Georgia is possibly more winnable for Harris. But what was your impression? I mean, do we read anything into those kind of polls? I don't know that we do. But what was your impression of Georgia and the state of play there?
Well, just a reminder that Joe Biden won Georgia by only 11,779 votes. There's that famous phone call of Donald Trump begging the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, you know, he only needs 11,000 votes. It's incredibly tight. It is the tightest of the swing states. 0.2%, I think, is the percentage difference between the two last time. Look, when you're in the urban centres like Atlanta, it's pretty solidly Democrat. You know, we saw a freshly painted mural of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz on a storefront. But once you get out into rural Georgia, and there is a lot of rural Georgia, about a third of the population lives out in the countryside, it's very, very pro-Trump. In fact, we didn't see a single Walz-Harris sign out in the countryside, and we saw a lot of Trump signs. We talked to a bunch of people. The black vote will be critical there. About a third of the electorate there are African American. We talked to one black lady out in the countryside, actually, who just seemed really disengaged, and I thought it was really interesting. And, you know, I sort of said to her, you know, surely with first opportunity to have a female black president, you'll be voting for Kamala Harris. And for her, you know, she wasn't. She's disillusioned. She might not vote at all. And for her, once again, it's all about the economy. And she said, look, I'm worse off now than I was under Donald Trump, and I haven't heard anything to convince me that will change under Kamala Harris. I thought that was a pretty interesting interview that we did with her.
Heather, can I just ask you, in terms of the swing states, you know, the southern swing states that people always talk about, the Sun Belt, the Georgias, the North Carolinas, the Arizonas, the Nevadas, do you view them as a different set of issues to the northern swing states, the Michigans, the Wisconsins, and the Pennsylvanias? Or is it all essentially the same factors? Obviously, there are racial differences and all the rest of it, but is it the same factors landing or not landing?
You know, that's such a good question. I do think that the same issues matter everywhere around the country. It comes down to the economy, and it comes down to immigration right now. And Americans are not as well off, according to the Census Bureau, as they were just a few years ago. And so those are the issues that people are voting on. And that's why, talking to an American voter, Dan, the woman that you did, said, you know, I might not turn out to vote after all. That's how Americans are feeling about this. And that's why I keep coming back to the fact that 61% of Americans, according to a New York Times Siena poll that was just done last week, say that they want change. Of those who want change, the vast majority believe that President Trump brings that change. And so either candidate, both candidates really need to address that, how they are going to make Americans feel secure economically, and how they're going to make Americans feel more secure in terms of their own safety. We have a wide open border, and that did not get enough attention last night. And President Trump could have done more to bring home those issues, to talk about those very concerns that American voters have. Upwards of 10 million plus illegals crossing the United States border in the last several years. It's an unheard of number that has compromised our national security. No other country would stand for anything like that. And so that's something that he could have done more on it, and he didn't because he misstepped a few times. I certainly hope he'll go back and do another debate again. I hope that Harris is sincere when she says she wants to do another debate. I don't know that that is necessarily true. And as for President Trump showing up in the spin room, he believes that there's no better advocate for him than himself. And I think that's exactly why you saw him go out there and speak to the media. And that's one area where he should get credit for being transparent, for speaking to the press, for not hiding from the press. Harris has done one interview since she was nominated, one, and then this debate. The American public deserves more, not somebody in hiding, but someone who's willing to come out and put all of her policies out there and have a constructive conversation about what exactly she stands for.
I think her team would point out one national interview. But anyway, let's not get sidetracked into that. Adam, we probably ought to wind up. So final thought. Let's agree she had a good night last night. Heather agrees. Pretty much all commentators seem to agree she had a good night. You know, it was one debate. It's very tight. All the polls seem to suggest she's still behind by a bit or quite a bit, depending on which one you read on the economy. We would normally consider that very consequential in terms into the run-up of an election. What does she, if you were in the room advising her now, what do you think she needs to do for this crucial 2 months to close this out? What would you be telling her?
I tell her, one, the polls don't vote, people do. And so regardless of what the numbers say, whether you're up in a state, you're down, the race is tied, you got to run through the tape and do everything you can to get people out to vote. That's one of the reasons why I think lost, or not lost, but kind of at the bottom of Taylor Swift's endorsement last night was a call for people to register to vote and to vote early. That is the type of sort of grassroots campaigning effort that you'll see from the Harris campaign, I think, for the next 55 days. They're very clear. We have the infrastructure advantage. We got to use it. So we've got 300 offices, they'll say, in the swing states. They've got over 2,000 staff in the swing states. They're all going to be working 18 hours a day, maybe more, to try to get every single voter out that they possibly can. That's how you do it. And then I'm sure she'll do more interviews and she'll go out and talk about her policies. Again, this week they rolled out a huge website with all their policies for everybody to read till they fall asleep. She'll talk about her policies. She'll do more interviews, but she'll also be talking about energizing voters, meeting them where they are across the country, not just in the big cities, doing the events, doing the rallies, meeting voters, and talking about her vision for a new way forward. That's what she has to do. I suspect the campaign, and what you heard from them last night, they recognize that. They're eyes wide open about the polls, and they know that the polls don't vote, the people do, and so they got to get people out to vote.
Heather, I think it's fair to say that last night might have reminded some Americans why they decided not to vote. You know, some of those who voted for him in 2016 but didn't in 2020, last night might have been a reminder of why that was. But as we've discussed, he still stands pretty strong in the economy, at least according to all measures we were able to look at. Let's suppose you're in the room with him tomorrow advising him, and maybe that would be a good idea given everything. What would you be saying to him strategically, tactically, 2 months to go? What bases do you need to hit? How do you hit them?
Of course, I think we need more women, not bros, getting out his message. Of course, president is the exception, but I think he needs to speak to women voters. I think he needs to speak more about his support for IVF treatments and a policy that he came up with to provide some sort of funding or coverage for IVF treatments for fertility for women. That would go over well with women voters. That was something that Harris did not address, honestly, last night. I think he needs to look forward to the future and be optimistic and stop talking about things of the past. People want an optimistic president to represent them. They want that. And I think if he were to do that and focus on the future and how he can make America better again and all of us to feel safer and more secure in the world, that he would be a lot better off.
Adam, very briefly, you wanted to get in just before I come to Dan at the end?
No, I think Heather's right. And if he has a second debate, maybe he'll have that opportunity. I think that's also what you saw from Vice President Harris last night. Laced in with all of her hits and traps she laid for Trump, she would then pivot at the end, talking about her new way forward and encouraging people of all political stripes to join her campaign. I suspect that's what you hear from the campaign throughout the fall.
Okay, Dan, final 2 months till we're all together in person on election night. Should be a hell of a night. It's going to be a remarkable couple of months. It's exciting. I know I shouldn't sound excited, but, you know, it is exciting. It's fascinating. It's riveting. Every step of it is you've got your heart in your mouth because you think, well, whatever is going to happen next, what is going to happen next? What's the next 2 months hold in your view? Will she do another debate? Will he do another debate? You know, are there any other big moments you're looking out for, or is it just grind from here, from the campaigner's point of view?
I wouldn't be surprised if there's another debate. I think both of them may have reasons for wanting to do that. But I think the other thing is just, you've got to have a little perspective here. I mean, 2 months ago, Joe Biden was debating Donald Trump. A lot has happened in 2 months. The whole thing's turned upside down and inside out. We've had an attempted assassination of one of the candidates, the other one dropping out. Kamala Harris appearing at the Democratic National Convention with everyone wondering, you know, if she's got what it takes. She did a great speech. She had a good night last night. She has got momentum, but there's a long way to go. Another 2 months to go. So this is all still to play for. It is going to be a nail biter, though, and hopefully we'll be there every step of the way.
We certainly will, and it sure will be a nail biter. All of you, as ever, thank you so much. Until the next time, the way things are going, it'll be quite soon. That's sadly all we have time for. We'll be posting new episodes of Talking Politics USA every week for you to watch on ITVX and possibly more frequently in the final furlong, and you can listen to them on your favourite podcast platform too. But for now, from all of us here, goodbye, and thank you very much for joining us on this fascinating week. In this fascinating week.